Pray my internet is working. Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome to Virtual TrekCon. It was day 3, Friday morning here. Well, Friday morning for me here in LA. And we got James Croft with us. And James is in the beautiful state of Missouri.
Yes, well, the state of Missouri, at least. Hello from the Midwest, everybody.
Welcome to Virtual TrekCon. So happy to have you with us. So I'm Scott Baker. I'm helping Ryan and Sarak and Melitza and everybody behind the scenes to make Virtual TrekCon happen. Also the writer director of Fifth Passenger, sci-fi thriller feature film with lots of Trek actors like Tim Russ, Armin Shimmerman, Doug Jones, Marina Sirtis. You can catch it free on like Amazon, YouTube, Tubi, stuff like that. Anywhere, just type in Fifth Passenger. At least in the States, different countries, it's different, but there it is. So James, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you relate to ethics?
Hey, everybody, I'm James Croft. I'm the leader of the Ethical Society of St. Louis, which is kind of like a non-religious church. It's a big community for humanists in St. Louis, Missouri. We have hundreds of members, tons of events every week, obviously right now, all of them online. And our purpose is to help people live the best lives they possibly can. And a big part of that, it's in the name, the Ethical Society, is focusing on questions of right and wrong, questions of ethics. How can we make decisions in our lives that ensure that we're being good rather than evil? And one of the reasons I love Star Trek is because, in my mind, it's a show that's all about that exact question. How can we be the best human beings possible?
Yes, for sure. And you've got a podcast.
Yes, for the Ethical Society, I make a podcast called Ethics and Chill. And you can find that at ethicsandchill.org. And it is a podcast about the ethics of pop culture. So there are a number of Star Trek episodes, but I've also explored video games like The Last of Us, other television shows and movies, comic books, all the sorts of ethical questions that are raised by pop culture phenomena. Because I think that pop culture is sort of the modern mythology of today. And it has a lot of lessons to teach us about how to live and how not to live, as long as we take it seriously. So in Ethics and Chill, what I like to say is we dive deep into things that people often consider shallow and explore the ethics of pop culture.
Great. So then you did this great talk on the ethics of Star Trek. You want to give us the nickel tour on that?
I'll have to be really brief because I could literally talk about this topic my entire life. I grew up with Star Trek. My mother is a huge Star Trek fan. She raised us as Star Trek fans. In fact, I remember once going to see George Takei at a Star Trek convention in the UK, and I was so nervous. I just couldn't even bring myself to say anything to him. And my brother and I had lined up to get an autograph for my mother. And so finally we got to the front of the line, and I handed him the thing to be autographed, and he said, "Hi," in that big, deep voice that he has. And I was like, "Hello." And he says, "This is for your mom." And I said, "Yes, she's taught us all about Star Trek." And he said, "Raising you the right way." And that's what my childhood was like. We were watching Star Trek all the time. And I think it's been formative for me in how I think about the world and becoming the sort of person that I've become. And I think the reason for that is that Star Trek is, unlike almost any other pop culture, sort of secular scripture. Each episode is like a little moral conundrum which the characters work together to try and solve. And it's sort of like a parable, almost like the parables in the Bible or in other religious traditions. In fact, I think the only difference really between the parables of Star Trek and the parables of traditional religion is that Star Trek's parables are better. You know, they have better values, they have better appreciation for science and the human condition, and they point towards a more hopeful future. And that's why I think Star Trek is very ethically relevant.
Yes. So yeah. You don't think that I'm a jealous god? You shall have other because is ethical.
Well, I have to say, one of my favorite moments in the entire Star Trek canon is when in Star Trek V they actually kill God with photon torpedoes. I think that's a brilliant moment in an underappreciated movie.
Yeah. I like some of the old TOS ones, like when they meet Apollo and some of these old sort of gods. It's a interesting kind of take, and I think that's what I appreciate about Star Trek and sci-fi in general. To me, good sci-fi in general is when you can use these different metaphors and kind of talk about these sort of deep issues in a fun way. Going to a planet and confronting a god. There's the one the TOS episode where they're all like following the commands of this computer that's in a cave, and the computer in the cave is making all the decisions for them and everything like that. Were you drinking an iced coffee earlier, or were you drinking a Coke, or what were you drinking?
No, I'm a Coke drinker. Although I do drink iced coffee. I mean, every gay man drinks iced coffee. Like,
okay. I was gonna,
please.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. I was gonna say the first ethical question is how do you drink your coffee? Before we get too deep into any of this
surely
stuff.
it's how do you drink your tea in a Star Trek panel? Obviously it's Earl Grey and hot.
Right. Yeah, I'm a coffee.
I think what you were saying is interesting about how science fiction helps us engage ethical questions.
Yes.
Gene Roddenberry, when he created Trek, was really clear about what he wanted to do. He was explicit about how he wanted to use the dramatic format of his show to, in his words, portray humanity in its various guises and beliefs, and to use characters to act out human problems and equations. So he knew that by having this slightly goofy science fiction setting set apart from the real world, it would be easier, particularly in those more censorious times, to explore difficult topics like racism and class antagonism and things like that than it would have been in a truly naturalistic show. And that's one of the reasons he chose to make Star Trek like he did.
Yeah, and it's very disarming because you can have like one of my favorite episodes, and I know you talked about it in your talk, The Measure of a Man. It's such a great episode, and obviously with Guinan coming in, what we realize what they're really talking about is racism and different forms of second class citizenry and things like that, and to be able to it's like you're all fine talking about a robot. And then or Android, and then once you apply that to humans, then it's like, oh, now this is real and it's heavy and people's emotions get involved and everything like that. But the beautiful thing is, by time you realize that they really are talking about people, you're already on the right and ethical side. You already, well, of course Data's a person. I mean, because I can see his face, and even though he's not supposed to have emotions, he kind of does have emotions, and so I feel for him, and he should have a sense of autonomy and things like that.
I think you're absolutely right. I love The Measure of a Man.
Yeah,
I think that's the archetypal Star Trek episode for me.
Yes, for sure. And it's just funny because it's a courtroom drama. It's really like it could be seen by some people as like, oh my God, this is such a boring episode, right? It's just people sitting around talking, but it's so deep and interesting, and that's why I love like Star Trek, and that's why I love sci-fi, is because you can have people in a room talking, and the room is the office in a starship, but all of a sudden it becomes exciting because the tension of, oh my God, what's going to happen? Are they going to shut him down? And you're going through all these dilemmas and stuff like that yourself.
Right. I think that's one of the stereotypes of Star Trek, is that it's people sitting around boardroom tables in space having boring discussions. And I think that what that misses is that actually the discussions Star Trek wants to have are fascinating discussions. They're the most profound questions about what it means to be a human being imaginable. So Measure of a Man, as you say, a whole hour of primetime television taken up with a courtroom discussion of the philosophy of personhood. If you pitch that to someone, they probably wouldn't say, oh yeah, let's put that on television. But because of the science fiction wrapper and the brilliant acting and writing, let's be honest, it is fascinating and it's interesting because human beings care about these questions. And that is, I think, Star Trek's greatest gift to pop culture is that it trusts its audience to be intelligent and to care about big questions about how we should live. Unlike so much pop culture stuff that has been made since then, it trusts people to really care about deep issues, and the drama is in resolving those moral problems, not in people shooting each other or explosions, etc. Well, not all the time, at least.
I mean, because there's the sort of the tendency, more and more like, oh, we have to have an explosion, we have to have a fight scene, we have to have some sort of action, going on. I think I don't want to make a comment about old Trek versus new Trek, but I think definitely there was, I mean, you look at DS9, DS9 is not a ship that's going anywhere. I mean, there were, there'd be people coming on and you'd have some stuff with the Jem'Hadar and things like that. But I mean, so much of DS9 was just interpersonal relationships and, ethical and moral dilemmas and things like that. And it's so engaging because you're interested in the characters and also the larger questions.
I think that one of the best moments out of the newest Picard series, and this is not a plot spoiler, so don't worry if you haven't seen it, is a moment when Picard returns to Starfleet Academy and he goes to the sort of front desk, the check-in desk of the Academy, and the young cadet or whoever it is behind the counter doesn't know who Picard is. And Picard clearly has this moment where he's kind of reckoning with his own age and potential irrelevance. And it's very powerful commentary on aging. And it doesn't require any action sequences or any special effects. It's just a human moment presented within this science fiction setting that really brings it home. And I think that's when Star Trek is at its best, when it trusts that its themes are interesting enough on their own.
Yeah, right. So let's look at one of the big themes of Star Trek. We have the Prime Directive, right?
Everyone wants to talk about the Prime Directive, the non-interference directive, which is routinely ignored and broken, bent. Like they find every single way to justify all sorts of ways to get around the Prime Directive. But the idea of it, the concept of the Prime Directive, is that more advanced, technologically advanced species shouldn't determine the direction of another culture. And so it comes out of a respect for the autonomy of other cultures that is quite important to the world of Star Trek. And I think the Prime Directive is really interesting in how it highlights a tension at the heart of Star Trek's ethics, because Star Trek is almost aggressively progressive in a sense, in that the Federation isn't above imposing its values on other cultures if they really think those cultures' values are bad. And so there's a very interesting tension played out in many episodes between their desire not to impose their will and be a sort of imperial force, which is absolutely not what they're supposed to be, but also their desire to sort of encourage other cultures to get to where the Federation is. And I think that that's one of the interesting tensions that we see played out in all sorts of interventions that one nation has in the governance of other nations on Earth today. It never turns out particularly well.
But and it becomes, I think, what you see in Star Trek and also in our mirrored reality here is that we can say we don't want to intervene in other people's, but we pick and choose and say, well, we kind of like these and we kind of don't like those. My brother gave me a plant, a milkweed plant, and it's the one plant that like monarch butterflies eat and lay their eggs and their caterpillars form on. And so he gave me one. I brought it home, and I got all these neat little caterpillars, and I know they're going to turn into beautiful monarch butterflies. And I go out there the other day, and there's a yellow jacket, which is like a little kind of a wasp thing, and it's trying to pick off and eat the caterpillars. And so that's nature, right? It's like, the one bug eats the other bug, but I don't want the little, beautiful caterpillars to die. So I put a net over the plant so that the yellow jacket can't get and eat the caterpillars, right? And I think that's the same kind of thing. It's like we pick and choose what bugs we like. We pick and choose what other peoples we like. And I think that like Star Trek, there's these episodes where, the one society is dominating the other society. And so they step in to sort of like make the peace, even though that's still technically violating their prime directive,
I love that people in the comments are saying how much you love this story. Clearly, some of your friends have heard the butterfly story before. I'm just noting their comments about it, and I love it too. I think it's a really interesting one because the Prime Directive states, at least in part, no starship may interfere with the normal development of any alien life or society. The normal development. And if we took that seriously, that meant that in your yellow jacket example, you would leave the butterflies to their fate, right? Because that's But that's not really the ethos of the Federation, which is that they don't want to impose their will on other societies, and they want to, it's kind of a reflection of the democratic ideal at the heart of Star Trek. And at the same time, they don't want people to persist in what they see as negative cultural patterns. There's a wonderful episode, I forget the name, I'm terrible with names, so someone in the chat is going to tell me the name of this episode and then we'll be able to say it, but where Picard is kind of infuriated about the idea that the appearance of the Enterprise is going to push a culture back into superstition because they believe that the Enterprise is like a god, right? And they're going to go back into superstition and darkness. No, and he's outraged by it because he sees it as a cultural regression. So there is this dueling tension at the heart of the Federation between desiring moral and social progress and not wanting to get involved. And I think many of us kind of feel this tension if we think about other countries in the world.
For sure. We got a message here from management. Somebody at the Seventh Rule says, we pick and choose which animals are cute pets and which ones are dinner. And that kind of like I had made a note earlier to talk about like the ethics of like veganism and vegetarianism. And I don't know if that's really hit on anywhere in Star Trek.
Oh, it totally is. They talk about that because they don't eat meat. They talk about how barbaric it is because all their replicator food is. I mean, they get the best of both worlds, right? Because they get replicated meat where they don't have to kill an animal for it. It's shaded a little in later series, but certainly in the Next Generation, the strong implication, as I understand it, is that people don't kill animals to eat them. Yeah. And yes, I mean, I have to admit that I do eat animals, but I actually agree with Star Trek that it's wrong.
Right?
It's a contradiction in my own ethical practice. But I think that certainly in a world where you don't have to kill animals to eat them, it would be incredibly wrong to kill animals.
Yeah,
to eat them. I think that's
for sure. And I mean, do you think that's the actual future of our society, is that we have something like, I mean, we've already seen replicated meat.
Do. Yeah, we're already growing meat and we've got all sorts of replacements. And I think there will be options for that. And I suspect climate change will push us to having to reevaluate what we eat in the course of our lifetime. So it may be a moot point.
Yeah, well, and if we're in, if we are lucky enough to ever get to interstellar space travel, just like it's not like it's like you're gonna have Noah's Ark and you're gonna have you're gonna have your cows and your sheep and their thing. I mean, they're gonna have to find some other way to feed people that's a little more efficient, if nothing else, just for the sake of efficiency, you know.
Lawrence of Geek Life Rules asks an interesting question. Would vegans and vegetarians exist in a world with replicators?
Huh.
That's a really interesting question, Lawrence. You know, I don't know. Like, certainly it seems to me that the moral argument in favor of vegetarianism and veganism would be moot in a world where no harm is coming to animals by creating those foodstuffs. And yet I could see someone making an argument that even eating replicated meat encourages people to think of other animals as a food, and so there's not considering them fully moral organisms, and that therefore they would choose to refrain. So I could see someone making an indirect and more complex argument in favor of vegetarianism and veganism in a world with replicators.
Yeah.
But yeah, I imagine someone making that argument.
So, one of the big things in Star Trek is this idea of, it's a very much like a socialist kind of society, right? We don't have money, like they're not really getting a salary and have like it. So, I think that's an interesting thought, to think about the future of our society, if that's somewhere we're going, and how that kind of plays out in this in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, the economics of Star Trek are absolutely fascinating, and there are some good published papers out there exploring what on Earth sort of economic system actually functions, at least within the Federation, because of course other alien species have different economic systems. And
the Ferengi, right?
Right, that's a prime example of a hyper-capitalist society, or hyper-mercantilist, maybe sort of libertarian society. Right. But the Federation's economics is often parodied as a sort of fully automated luxury gay space communism. I think people have seen the meme, although sadly until recently lacking in the gay part. But I do think that there's a challenge to our own acquisitive mindset in the heart of Star Trek. One of my favorite quotes is from Odo in Deep Space Nine, who says, "I'll never understand this obsession with accumulating material wealth. You spend your entire life plotting and scheming to acquire more and more possessions until your living areas are bursting with useless junk. Then you die, your relatives sell everything, and start the cycle all over again." And that quote makes me really anxious about the useless junk behind me on the walls that people can see. But I think it's a useful challenge, because I think particularly US culture is very touchy about challenges to the economic system. It seems to almost be part of American identity to be wedded to a particular form of consumer capitalism. And Star Trek is definitely not wedded to that form of consumer capitalism. It suggests that we could have totally different economic models in the future, and that they wouldn't be based on buying and selling and accumulating stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple interesting points there, like what Odo says. But I mean, I would question, like, when he says useless junk. I mean, obviously, I've got things from like my movie and other sci-fi memorabilia and things like that, and as well as you do. Like, are they useless? Like, what's that frame of reference to? They say one man's garbage is another man's treasure, right? And I think as a creature that we've grown to be sort of through our evolutionary process, a type of animal that likes to have stuff, whether it's tools or food or clothes or things like that. There's a certain amount of, like, I think, consumerism that's sort of built into our genetics. Like, even before we get into this sort of like 20th, 21st century consumerism, that, like, these things bring us joy and bring us a certain bit satisfaction. A couple of people have commented on my mug. So this is like a mug that they've used in Star Trek, right?
I love it.
Yeah, but this was actually this mug we gave to my father for Father's Day when we were a little kid back in the 80s, and it was original travel mug, and it's designed this way so that, and it had a grippy thing that's since worn off, but you could put it on the dash of your car, and as long as your coffee was below this line, it wouldn't really spill. Mine's a little bit full, so it spills a little bit, but when you're driving, it wouldn't spill. The the way the design was. And so I guess somebody in Star Trek saw it and says, wow, this looks like a space AG kind of mug, and we're gonna put it in the thing, right? Well, my father has since passed away, and we cleaned out his house, and I found it amongst the things that we had cleaned out, and then realized that it was something that had been in Star Trek. And so it became having a sentimental meaning for me, that it was something connected to my father, but also it touches in Star Trek. And I remember, just like you, I watched Star Trek as a kid, and I watched that with my dad. And so it's something that when I'm having my coffee, I can think about my dad, and I can think about those experiences as a kid. And so it's not useless junk to Odo,
to your father, right?
Yeah, or somebody else. He sees it, oh, that's just a coffee mug, and that's useless junk. But to me, it has a sentimental meaning as well. And I think we can, how do we as people like separate ourselves from that, and maybe it's that sort of the Buddhist sort of philosophy of not having attachments to things. And and I think that's one of the cool things I love about Star Wars. Not to jump ship here, but
Careful what you say.
Yeah, right. Looking at like the Jedi and their kind of philosophy of not having attachments and not having love and things like that is like, is it really possible to like have that kind of strict mindset and philosophy of like not having attachment to physical things? It's like it's so hardwired into who we are, and is it possible that our society can move past that, or is that always going to be? I mean, even
some people do, right? Even now, some people, there are monks in the world who live without possessions effectively, and who Odo might approve of, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that would work or be satisfying for everybody. If people want, by the way, a really interesting discussion of the philosophy of the Jedi, that is the first episode of Ethics and Chill, so you can listen to that. And I'm talking with a really popular Star Wars author about exactly that question. But to return to the Star Trek universe, I think that this discussion we're having highlights something very interesting about the way that these sort of philosophical discussions are different when they're prompted by a work of art, like a TV show, than when they might be in a philosophical journal. Because the richness of having this discussion about something like Star Trek is that we don't just get to consider what Odo is saying, but we also have to consider that Odo is saying it. And we have to think about what sort of character is Odo, right? Remember, this is a kind of gelatinous, like liquid, shape-shifting life form who lives in a bucket. He doesn't own anything, right? He lives in a bucket in an empty room. So this is obviously shading his experience of this. And people have put in, there's a lot of great quotes in the chat. Like Marcia says, one person's useless junk is another person's treasures. And I think that your story about your mug, Scott, reminds us that stuff is not just useless and incidental and a collection of junk. It often is an expression of who we are. And one of the interesting things about Odo is that he finds it very difficult to express his own personal identity pretty much all the way through the series. But I think that Star Trek even grapples with that whole issue. I think of something like Data keeping the hologram of Tashiar, right? He starts to keep things. He starts to build relationship with things that express his unique personality. And so I don't think Star Trek says we all have to become monks and live in a bucket like Odo. I think what it says is consider this way of living.
Exactly. Yeah.
What might that offer the species? Consider this other way of living. How might this serve us better? And so it's more experimental and open than just being kind of rigidly didactic.
Well, for sure, and I think that's and it's all about balance, right? It's about having those different voices and maybe considering that, like there is, just like there's value in Odo's philosophy and the way he lives his life. There's value to how the Ferengi live and their philosophy of life and their like hyper capitalism and stuff like that. You know, there's a certain I think. If you look at libertarianism and the people, the sort of the ongoing political debate that we have here in the States, at least, is there is something about entrepreneurship and innovation and things like that come from the sort of hyper capitalism and things like that.
I think that one of the interesting things about Trek is that it has both. It's kind of similar to our discussion of the Prime Directive. It both wants to respect and honor other cultures, and it also wants to kind of assert the superiority of some ways of living over others.
Right.
And I think that Trek as a franchise looks down on the Ferengi culture. Right. I think that it kind of says that way of living is not optimal. This is not, and obviously all these, and we should probably talk about race and how these are potentially racial stereotypes and things like that, because there's a lot of criticism of the Ferengi for being potentially anti-Semitic, etc.
Yeah, space Jews, yeah.
But yes, but putting that aside just for a moment, I think it's pretty clear that the series is saying that these different alien cultures are all representations of aspects of ourselves, right? The whole point of these different alien cultures is that they represent different aspects of human culture. One of my pet peeves is when people think that Star Trek is saying we are the Federation and the mirror universe Terran Empire are the baddies and we are not them, when in fact the whole point is not that. The point is that we could become the Federation or we could become the Terran Empire, and right now I think we're going dangerously close to Terran Empire territory. But that's the same with the Ferengi, right? We could become that sort of society, and I think Star Trek is saying let's not.
Yeah, or in another sense, we're always simultaneously both. We are both the Federation and we're both the Terran Empire. Just what day of the week are you talking about, or what, like who's currently president or who's this, like, there's it's like we're always kind of hopping that line, and it's about I think it being called the mirror universe is such great wording, because it's to me, it's about holding that mirror up to yourself, right? It's about looking at yourself in that opposite way and examining that. It's not just, okay, this is opposite day, bizarro world, but there's it's about that self-examination and that self-reflection and like you said, like, is this the path I want to go down, or is this the path I'm already going down, kind of thing. I love all the mirror universe episodes and in the old original series. I think it's such great television, especially for today. I grew up, like I said, watching that Star Trek, and also Twilight Zone. I absolutely love the old Twilight Zone stuff, and that was a lot of the same. And obviously Twilight Zone's a lot darker, and they always have those great ironic twist endings that leave you thinking, and it doesn't always go for the resolution that I think Star Trek tries to do. And I think that's one of the great things about Star Trek is it is so uplifting, and they're always trying to find the right answer at the end of the day.
Right, and they believe that there are at least some better answers and worse answers, and I think that is what makes it uplifting. It doesn't just pose these problems and then say, well, it's a dilemma. It tries to say, no, there are ways through these dilemmas. There are better ways of acting and worse ways, and here are some examples of better ways. Mm-hmm. I think that's also why it's rather more uplifting than some fantastic but more contemporary science fiction like Battlestar Galactica, the remake. Great series, love it, but it's not about uplifting the best in the human spirit. It's really about kind of delving deep into the worst of it and showing how bad it can go. And there are uplifting moments in that series, but in general, it's a bit of a downer.
Yeah, for sure.
I wonder if we've got about halfway through our discussion. I wonder if we want to see what people want us to discuss. Would that be something we can do?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. If anybody listening in, once again, thanks to everybody for joining. This is so awesome. I mean, we got over 100 people watching
No
here.
way!
From
That's
around
fantastic.
the world. So if you've got a question that you want, go ahead and type it in the comments, and live chat something you want us to talk about, a particular episode or ethical moral dilemma that came up. One of my favorite episodes is from DS9 and it's House of Quark, and I love that episode so much because we get this great character arc from Quark where he's faced with like moral and ethical dilemmas one after another through his journey, where it's at first it's about the self-preservation, but then it makes a turn to where by the end of the episode we've got Quark who's supposed to be libertarian and self-serving and everything like that. We've got him deciding to be honorable, something that is the realm of the Klingons, is all about honor, honor before everything, and Ferengi is profit before everything, and to see him make that change, I think is such a beautiful episode, and it goes into those, I think, questions of like, when is it okay to lie? Is it okay to lie if it saves somebody's feelings and things like that? Whether it's a big thing like in this episode about honor, or if it's just about just those normal everyday kind of situations that you find yourselves in, where we're taught, it's you always have to be honest and never lie, but we always have these things where even if it's somebody gave us a sort of TED talk or something like that where they were talking about how many times the average person lies throughout the day without realizing that they lie, even if it's something simple like somebody asks you how you're doing. Oh, I'm doing fine. Even if you're like having a really bad day, and but we have this knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, I'm okay, how are you doing, or I'm good, because we don't want to project that negativity on that other person. So we just reflexively lie and say that we're doing fine or we're doing okay or something like that. Or because maybe it's more work to say what's wrong and kind of go into all the things that are bugging you that day or something like that,
I just want to uplift your love of the House of Quark. And I think there's a couple of really nice things about the episode. Firstly, it's a really good example of Star Trek continually humanizing and finding good qualities in some of its less obviously good characters and cultures, right? So as you say, this is a great moment when Quark shows bravery and honor, which is not qualities that we always associate with him. And also when Gowron stops the duel, he's kind of showing a certain sort of honor, which is not always what you might think. Oh, Klingons are just going to kill everyone anyway. And they don't. They have a code as well. And I also think just a little timely thing about this episode, I seem to recall that this is the one in which Keiko has to close her school because there are no students. Well, yes. How about that? All the schools are closed right now because there are no students, so Keiko can go on her botanical expedition, I guess.
Yeah, right. Huh? So Glenn Everson is going to stir the pot here, and he says Garrick was the moral compass of DS9, changed my mind.
I wonder whether Glenn is in that fantastic Facebook group, which is all about Garrick and Bashir memes. But if not, you should be, because it's a great Facebook group. I think Garrick is a fascinating character, and people clearly resonate with Garrick. I mean, whenever I talk about Star Trek, people talk about Garrick. The mysteriousness over his background, his identity, and the lack of the way that we don't really understand what his motives are through much of the series makes it really difficult to interpret his actions. And I think that the way that they held on to that for so long is really impressive writing. Like, they really created an interesting arc there. And some of the Garrick episodes, when the sort of climactic Garrick episodes, is some of my favorites. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's like a character like Garrick, who's the sort of like double agent in a way, where okay, he's on my side, so he's a good guy and we can like him. He's doing what I want to do, but at any moment you don't know that turn, and I think that's what's so interesting and fun about him. Is that Garrick seems almost amoral in a sense, where he may make the ethical moral decision, but you never know if he's making it for the ethical moral reason or if he's doing it for some sort of self-serving way. And definitely that complexity, that moral ambiguity, right, is what I think makes that character so interesting for us to watch time and again, because you can go back to these old episodes and you still don't know, even with all the information you have from the show being ended, you still don't know exactly where he's coming from, because he left you with a mystery about who he really was and where his like loyalties really lie. And I think that's also something telling about us, is that we always seek to know that, right? Like I don't care if you're my friend or you're my enemy. I just want to know that way I can know how to assess you on a day-to-day basis. Like, are you my friend or are you my enemy? But this sort of jumping back and forth makes it so difficult for us to sort of like wrap our minds around somebody, but he's able to kind of smile and, win us over with his charm and his little stories.
Well, yeah, and also sort of the complexity of coming to love a character who we learn was an assassin and a torturer. He is not a good person on many metrics of goodness, but he is a charming person who becomes a good friend to many of our favorite characters, and he is a complex person. It's, again, this is going to sound like a ridiculous comparison, but I think that there's a similar spirit behind both Star Trek and the works of Shakespeare, in that I always feel like Shakespeare is always trying to humanize all his characters all the time, regardless of who they are. There's a wonderful moment in Macbeth where even a murderer who has like 2 lines expresses remorse and doubt about what they've done. Like, he humanizes every character. And I think Star Trek does that, ironically, for a show about aliens, but it constantly reveals layers and complexity to even its most the characters we want to hate the most, the unsympathetic characters. Like, even someone like a Gul Dukat or something has layers, and we get to know them better, and everyone has their own motivations, and I think that's very humanistic.
Yeah, well, and looking even at the bigger picture of DS9 with like the Bajoran, I think is so interesting, because it asks, if you step back and you look, there's so many episodes, especially the one where they try to convince Kira that she's actually a Cardassian that's been turned into a Bajoran, right? And the guy who's supposed to be her father, I'm sorry, I don't remember these characters' names, but it asks you that question of like, when does a rebel freedom fighter become a terrorist, right? And that's something that I think, especially being an American, is that's a question we don't like to talk about and to think about. When it was 1776, it's really easy for us to say we were revolutionary, rebellious freedom fighters. But when you talk about modern day 20th, 21st century, and we talk about other people that aren't Americans, well, you're automatically a terrorist, right? These people aren't freedom fighters. These people aren't rebels, things like that. And it's all perspective. It's all point of view. And I think that's one of the great things I love about Star Trek. And again, like what we're talking about is like, if you put it in space on spaceships, all of a sudden you're not really talking about that real world thing that's happening. You're talking about a fairy tale and something like that. And you can go into those issues, and you can even, sorry to go back to Star Wars, but same thing with Star Wars, like is, Luke and Han and, the Rebel Alliance, are they just terrorists, or are they, like what's that,
I only have two thoughts about that. First, I think the people who make the latest Star Wars movie are terrorists, and secondly, the only thing I would say that I disagree with is that it's not so easy to talk to a British person about what happened in 1776 and say that you were freedom fighters rather than terrorists.
Well, see, that's exactly the point, right? It's like as an American, it's easy for us to say that, but as a British person, like, all of a sudden that becomes a little more complicated. And it's the same time, and it's the same story. And we'll just sit here and wait for your apology for just kidding.
So I'm seeing that there's some great chat about the Marquis. There's a number of people mentioning the Marquis, which is obviously a great example of this question, and particularly resonant today. I'm actually intending to have an episode on Ethics and Chill specifically about the Marquis and exploring this question of freedom fighter / terrorist and what that means and how we make that judgment. So look for that one in the future.
Yeah, and then we have characters like the great Tuvok, who we were first introduced to him as a sort of double agent infiltrating the Maquis. So much great stuff in there. I need to rewatch Voyager. I've watched it all the way through, but I haven't gone back and rewatched it to really get into. There's so many great double agent and all these kind of things going back and forth, throughout that show.
I'm just distracted because Lawrence is writing, it's the OG Brexit, James, about the Revolutionary War. He's trying to get me to be really, really angry about the state of my country and the state of the world. So I'm just gonna look, Kirsten, I'm sorry, is bringing this really contemporary into the discussions that we're having right now as a nation, exactly about the genocide perpetuated against Indigenous people in this country. Right. And that's one of the areas where I honestly think, and this might take us to talking about the most recent Trek series, my sense is that Trek has slightly fallen down in its ethical obligations more recently. That my feeling is it was a more daring show when it began, and particularly during kind of next gen era, than it became after many series, that it was willing to take on more contemporary issues. Now, I wonder whether, I certainly feel like there is a new activist spirit in Discovery. I think that there's something very contemporary and current about Discovery. It feels like it's part of the cultural conversation we're having right now in all sorts of ways. I mean, just think about the casting and think about the characters it's introduced. Think about the themes it's addressing, like the kind of the Terran Empire and the whole mirror universe. And there's even one moment where, well, I don't know how much I can talk about Discovery. Do people think that Discovery is out of spoiler territory now?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
There's a quote that's given. I see whether I can find it. I'm pulling from this huge document, which has all my information about Star Trek, but I mean, Tully says at one point in Discovery, the only way we can stop ourselves from becoming them, the Terran Empire, is to understand the darkness within us and try to fight it. And I think that is quite a resonant theme, right? That is exactly what we're trying to do in America right now, isn't it? We're trying to understand the darkness in our own history, the darkness occurring in our own politics, and try to fight it. I mean, that's a battle hymn for the resistance.
Right. Yeah, and I think I think that's some of the things that the older shows did well, and I think the newer show struggles with. I mean, it's easy. I don't want to get too much into that sort of thing, and I definitely don't want it to be. I don't like the discussions about whether this is good Trek or bad Trek or something like that. It just is. But I think it's easy to have something like a gay kiss in a show. I mean, that is
Too late for that to be
right. It
cutting
doesn't.
edge.
Yeah, it's sort of that's to me is just sort of like kind
But
of
I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's great to have is like now this is this is something that doesn't mean anything in the sense of this is just normal everyday life now. Like we have heterosexual relationships, we have gay relationships, we have Neelix. It's like I think that's the kind of thing that should be there. But if you're talking about like the big questions and the big topics and morals and ethical dilemmas, and I think that's something that maybe Discovery suffers from because it's more of a serialized show where it's one big story, that it's not like TOS and TNG and DS9 where you could have an hour block where you asked a question, you have some characters struggling with how they're going to deal with that. They answer the question, and then the show ends, and then we can do that again next week.
I think you're absolutely right. That the serialization, the fact that it's a whole arc now in Discovery and Picard is quite challenging to tell the sort of stories that Star Trek traditionally told, which are self-contained little parables.
Yeah.
And I think that this is something they haven't quite nailed, at least in my perspective. I love the new Trek, but I don't think it quite gets that sense that we are exploring moral issues that I think is distinctive of Star Trek as a franchise. And I'm sure they'll get it. Some of the episodes do feel like that. There are some episodes that feel exactly like that. And the themes that they explore, I think, are very resonant and valuable and interesting.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that I also feel like there's something about New Trek where the stakes are so high that it's difficult to explore some of those interesting, smaller moral questions. Like you gave the example of the House of Quark, right? That what is at stake in that episode is perhaps the life of Quark and the honor of Quark, right? That's it.
Right.
It's not, the galaxy is not under threat. Like this could happen and the vast majority of the galaxy would be fine. Whereas in Discovery, particularly, like the whole galaxy is under threat. And so they have to focus on that all the time. Right. I think that there was something charming about older Trek where it's like, this episode is just discussing whether holograms can become sentient and what will you do about that.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to affect anything. It's just an episode in the holodeck, and I like that. And I kind of miss it.
Well, and that's the thing is like because there's no space. Like you were talking about the side story of Keiko in House of Cards. Like who's got time to worry about if Keiko and O'Brien's marriage is happy? If at any moment you could get taken over, like having the stakes so high doesn't leave a lot of room for these interpersonal stories. Or when you do have these interpersonal stories, they seem out of place, or it's just like, man, who's got time to worry about that kind of stuff. Like I love watching Walking Dead, but sometimes there'll be these scenes where like the zombies are busting down the house, and all of a sudden everybody's gonna die, and then two characters go off to to a back room to like discuss their relationship. You're like, the zombies are busting down the door, like eating people's faces off, and you're having a discussion about whether you love each other. It's like now's not the time to worry about that.
I think that I don't want to give the impression I don't like the new Star Trek. I do like it. And I think it's a really daring reimagination of what Star Trek can be. And I think that Star Trek should change with the times. I think the idea that it should always be the same is wrong, that it should respond to our current culture. And I think that particularly Discovery really took on some central issues that are right at the heart of the cultural conversation right now. And I think that's really good. It doesn't quite give me the warm, fuzzy feeling that original Star Trek did, but honestly, maybe that's not what we need. Maybe we need a kick up the bum to be kind of woken up to some of the challenges in society, and Discovery certainly tries to do that.
Yeah, for sure. We're closing in on our hour here.
I know.
I know.
I feel like we've only just begun, Scott.
I know. We'll have to do this again. Maybe yeah, I don't know. We'll figure out how to continue this type of conversation into the future. But once again, I want to thank everybody who's been supporting Virtual TrekCon, who came on to watch this, and definitely continue to share what we're doing here, on the social medias and everything like that. I mean, this whole thing for us is about trying to give something back to what we're missing in Vegas this year. Like, because this is the kind of thing I love going down to the Masquerade bar and having a beer and chatting with other Star Trek fans about our favorite episodes and stuff like that.
It's been a dream of mine to be part of a Star Trek convention in this way. So
here we are.
Thank you for making my dream come true, and thank you for everyone in the chat. I put my Twitter handle in the name here, but it's @Croft Speaks, and you can find me on Twitter. And I'll do some version of my ethics and Star Trek talk again online, so that people can join if they want to. Last time I did it, we broke Zoom because so many people tried to join it. So we'll try and break Zoom again, and I look forward to seeing all of you there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm Mr. Scotty Baker. I'm on Twitter. I don't use Twitter very much. I primarily use Instagram and stuff like that. And like I said, you can check out Fifth Passenger. And also on my YouTube channel, I've done a couple animated Star Trek fan films, animated very, very loosely. For my love of Star Trek and the Star Trek fans. They're a little tongue in cheek, just poking fun, having fun with this the sort of meta universe of Star Trek and Star Trek fan films. So one is called Cease and Desist, and it's about the CBS Paramount cease and desist order that they've been giving to some of the fan films. And then the other one is called Quarantined, and it's just a fun little look at our lives in the quarantine era. So we
remember to check out my podcast, Ethics and Chill, for more discussions like this. Scott, I'd love to have you on the podcast if you'd like to come on.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, for sure. That sounds fun. Yeah, I've got a podcast that I did. We haven't done an episode in a while because things have been crazy, but it's called the Old Fashioned Hollywood Podcast, and we drink old fashions and talk about life in Hollywood as filmmakers and things like that. So that's that. But we still got a couple minutes. But let's see if there's any.
Who's got one question we can answer in like 1 minute?
Oh, let's see. I'll have to put this fascinating thing, Scott and James.
Oh,
this is my mom, Carolyn. So,
no,
yeah.
That's
so
delightful.
Yeah. She's out there in Kansas, not too far from you. She's in Galena, Kansas, which is right by Joplin, Missouri. So, it's a fun part of the world. Let's see what else we got. Eve England's been commenting a lot. Thanks for scheduling this panel. Well, thanks for watching. This is like I said, this is why I love Star Trek and sci-fi in general is the ethic and moral dilemmas, and I love having these discussions, and this it's so great to be able to do this and just to be able to continue to have great content that comes out, whether it's old Star Trek or new Star Trek or whatever.
What's the next thing coming up in the con so we can tell people what's coming up right now?
Let's see what is coming up next year. Let's see. I got a minute here to tell everybody what's coming up. It's in the link in my YouTube there. You click on whatever that link is and it'll immediately take you to the next thing. But it looks like, it's the Klingon makeup tutorial. Yeah, so
I can't wait.
Yeah, I actually filmed that. It's Thomas Supernaut, who's an Emmy award-winning makeup artist from he's been on all the shows, but he has an Emmy on Deep Space Nine. He was our makeup artist on Fifth Passenger as well. And so I filmed him doing a makeup on Rico E. Anderson, doing a Klingon makeup, and he's telling all these great stories about he's worked in Trek for about 10 years. And unfortunately, I had to edit the thing down to about an hour, but there's a good hour and 40 minutes that eventually I'll post in the unedited one, but of him talking about all these great stories of his life as a makeup artist in Star Trek. So definitely
That's awesome.
click on that link on there in the description and watch that.
And before we go, Eve England asks Section 31, good or bad? And the formal answer is bad. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about having a badge that says I'm in a secret society.
I'd wear it.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, thanks again, and have a great day. Stay ethical, stay moral.
Live long and prosper. Thanks for joining us.
Love you all. Take care, and see ya. Here we go.